Hi, everyone. I'm Siddhartha Khosla. I'm a songwriter, composer, music producer, and a former Sona board member and creator advocate. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of our In the Room with series. And I'm so excited today. We have a very, very special, talented guest, and who is such an incredible, phenomenal talent. And I'm so thrilled to be talking to her today. I'm joined by singer, songwriter, author, and artist AZRA. Hi, AZRA.
Hello, Sid. Thank you so much for having me. And I am also very honored and excited to be in this with you. So thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm just so pumped to talk to you today. And I figure we can just, instead of me reading a bio or something, it might be nice for everyone here to sort of get to know you a little bit. And so if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself before we get into this conversation and just tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and your journey with music and how you got here.
Yeah, sounds good. So, hi guys. I am Azra. I'm an artist, singer, songwriter based in Los Angeles. I create and perform pop rock music. I created my own genre called substance pop, which is kind of like a combination of all of my influences growing up, which includes like pop, rock, metal, some Christian influences as well as Korean music, because I was born in South Korea. I moved to the Bay Area, San Jose, at 9 years old, and I didn't know any English. I only knew like half of the alphabet before coming to America, and then I ended up learning English through music and just, through performing arts, forming like two girl groups and things like that. And yeah, I've been releasing music since 2017, and then, but I've been doing music since I was a little baby. My mission in all this in doing what I do is really just, inspiring myself and also other people, most importantly, to go after their dreams and, just try and not give up, and just being themselves unapologetically.
Wow. That's pretty. There's a lot in there to unpack, um, and sort of the sort of operative sort of phrase in that I'm kind of getting from all this is something that you and I have in common, and why we're all here as well. We're here celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and I think a really sort of important part of that discussion is. Talking a little bit about what that means to you, what that means to me. Tell us a little bit about, and I'll tell you, I can tell a story about sort of my family story too. But tell us a little bit more about your Korean background, um, and sort of like just a little bit about your childhood, and sort of at what point did you realize that music was something for you, and talk a little bit about that sort of the how that sort of worked in your family,
Yeah.
having that sort of like love for music. What did that mean to your parents, to your family, and to you, and how did that impact that relationship?
Yeah, for sure. So, growing up, I mentioned I was born in Korea. So, ever since I was like a kid, my mom was a choir singer. So she, I grew up Catholic. So she would take me to church, and she told me stories where even when she was pregnant with me, she would go to choir practice and then just like sing basically to the people, but then like really to her baby inside, which is me.
Um,
But anyway, so I was kind of born into like a very musical family. With my mom being a singer, and then just like my great grandmother, also great aunt, also being in music and things like that. But yeah, just and then I started learning piano as a little kid, as well as violin. And then yeah, just I felt like ever since I was a kid, when I look back now, I'm like, I think I kind of lived like my life just following just music and just any like performing arts that I can get involved in. So in addition to that, I started doing hip hop dancing since I was a kid.
Mm.
And but growing up in Korea, my parents were kind of all about, hey, let my kids experience what they are drawn to. So my mom and dad just let me, explore that side of,
That's
um,
great.
yeah, things that I was interested in. And then my family decided to immigrate and move to America, to the Bay Area when I was 9, and that's when things kind of switched a lot. I was just growing up as just like a regular kid in Korea, and then boom, I had to be, in a new foreign country, with no knowledge in the culture, the people, the language and everything.
Yeah.
So when I first came to America, I didn't know any English, and it was all new to me. So the first thing I did when I started my middle school up in NorCal was figuring out like what arts and like performing arts clubs I can join. Um,
Mhm.
so I formed like 2 girl groups. One was a K-pop group with 2 Korean
Nice.
friends I made in America. And then another girl group with, just a bunch of like, 3 girlfriends from school, mixed race. Yeah. And then that's kind of how I navigated through, my early like school years and into like later school years and things like that. And I think as an AAPI person growing up, and first being an immigrant, and then becoming more assimilated to the culture and being a citizen and things like that. Um, I think in terms of my household and like my parents, they were always very supportive, but there was kind of, an underlying feeling of, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but feeling of like, oh, well, because even though my parents didn't pressure me to, go after a certain career or anything like that, I put that on myself, as an immigrant, what am I supposed to do? But I think overall, I never let that go. And I think even maybe the pressures around me that I put on myself were there. I just never let it go. And I think that's kind of been the journey. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating, and I think like, and so the first group. It's interesting because the very first group that you started was a K-pop group with your friends here, and
Yeah.
that second group you started. What was the vibe of that music?
The vibe of that music, it was just singing covers, we were singing,
Songs in English. Songs in
oh yeah,
English.
all pop
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really cool because, I also met friends who also like came to America during the same time.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, we all spoke Korean, we knew the music, and then we kind of got introduced to more of that like, mainstream K-pop music when we got to America. So we were able to
Hmm.
explore that. And then also going to public school and being, amongst a lot of different friends from different races and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it kind of threw me into the world of just, being around all types of people in America. It was
Yeah.
kind of a big culture shock for me, but obviously, thanks to music and thanks to people around me and the teachers and stuff like that, like I was able to, you know.
But I think what this is sort of like, and the reason I'm asking these questions is, and I know we're going sort of off of sort of like there's some points we need to talk about too, but I find this interesting, and I want to stop for a second, just quickly talk about this, and then we can move on. But um, I think what happened to you when you came here is that you found a sense of community, and you found a community with whom you could relate. And in your case, there were sort of immigrants that had just come to this country around the same time as you had, and and that was really really important also in this sort of like very formative time for you. You come here, nobody. The language is everything is new. Every part of American society and culture, from the language to the culture, to schooling, everything is new to you. And so I think it's really really important that you were able to find that community. And I think that's also like why we're all here today, is that there is a community here of AAPI composers and songwriters and musicians, who you know who need to sort of like support one another and stick by each other and help each other through whatever issues sort of arise from this crazy business that we're in. I mean, there's so many sort of there's so many unknowns in this industry, right? Like in terms of like of where your career is going to go. You don't really know. And you're likely going to have to make a ton of pivots along the way to get to where you want to get. And we can talk about some of those pivots that
Like the ultimate
we
jungle.
did. Yeah, it is. And so having sort of that center, but having that center of like people that you can like talk to and go to, who can be there for you. And this is why like you and I are here in this conversation for anybody listening as well. It's like we're all here to support each other. And so like I'll just say it out here, if any whoever like if you're staying on for the whole time to listen, great. But just like reach out to us or reach out to me, and I'm volunteering you too, but reach out like to me on like social media or message me. I'm always like checking that stuff. And so like, I hope that I can at least in some way be some help in some way, um, in this process for like anybody needing that sort of support of someone else who's like, you know, Indian or South Asian or whatever that like wants that support. And that brings me into a little bit about sort of my story. My parents moved to this country in the late 70s, and and then I was born soon after they got here, so now you know how old I am. But they came here with basically nothing. They came here with $8, and it was sort of like the quintessential immigrant experience. There were a bunch of like doctors and lawyers and engineers that the U.S. was trying to get out of countries like India to come to the U.S. And to sort of like they wanted to bring that talent into the U.S. And so my parents were in that wave of immigrants that came, and they moved to New Haven. They were both doing their graduate programs at Yale. My dad was in the law school. My mom was in the med school. But they were in school all day and working throughout the night. And so I was born, and my parents had to make this very tough decision about bringing me back to India and leaving me with my grandparents, to be raised by them, until my parents were ready to bring me back. So I was raised in Delhi, India, at a very young age. I don't remember a lot of it because it was like I was like 2, 1, 3, whatever in that space. But I know there were formative experiences that I had in that time that I know are in my blood and that are like baked into my DNA at this point, that have helped me in my music career in ways that like I can't even like articulate, because it's just like some of that stuff is in me, that Indian music. Anyway, so that was their story, and then they eventually brought me back to the U.S. when I was like I think 4-ish, somewhere around there, maybe end of 3. But they brought me back here when they sort of had their footing in place, and then we grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey. Go Jersey. And then I went to college in Philadelphia and studied history. But then also had been sort of like singing my whole life. My mom had recognized at a young age that I could sing, and she would, every sort of Sunday at temple, I was the kid that would sing in front of all the aunties and uncles. We call all our parents' friends aunties and uncles. And so there were like 150 people like every weekend. We'd sing these like religious devotional Hindi songs. But I would sit on my little harmonium, kind of like the one over here. So like, it's this guy and I would get up there and sing and play, and that's how I learned music, just singing singers that like my parents grew up listening to, Indian singers like Lata Mangeshkar and Kishore Kumar and these like incredible singers. And so that's sort of that was their story. But then as I got older and I wanted to do this as a career, my parents were the ones that actually encouraged me. My mom was the one that was like, "Hey, you should sing," and she would write lyrics out for me to sing at temple. But then when it was
Amazing.
time for to do this seriously, that was a point of sort of, I wouldn't say contention, but it was a point. It was a very worrying moment for my parents. I know that. It wasn't easy for them to sort of accept that I wanted to do a career in music. And it wasn't because they didn't think that the talent was there or that I could do it. I think they just worried about like what they worried about, like drugs and all the bad vices that
Idea of
the idea of like what this
that.
represents, like the vices, and they're like, oh, I don't want my son to get involved in that world, and they didn't think I would, but like it was more that they were worried for like all the sort of like vices that come with this world. And also, that's one piece of it. The other piece of it was like there's no certainty in any of this. Like, you study hard, you go to college, you graduate college, you do well on your MCATs or your LSATs, you go to law school, and after that you have a job waiting at a hospital or at a law firm or whatever it is that you want to do. My dad is a teacher, but he taught for many years, taught law. But there's a sort of more there's a more predictable path to what you want to achieve. Whereas here, there's no path almost. It's like you literally are like, it's a jungle, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I had that same weight on me that you have, which is like, oh my gosh, like my parents came to this country with nothing, and then they sacrificed everything to put me through college, all this other stuff, and then I go and pick up a guitar. Like, that's crazy when you think about it. It's like all this investment in my education and all this other stuff, and then I go and pick up a guitar and want to sing. And I think that is the interesting part of this, with the psychology of this for us, probably as well. But like, and so it was easy. But it's for you. You mentioned that it was relatively, they were supportive of your commitment.
I would say, yeah, like I can totally empathize with you with that. Like, and do you think I also think that it's like lack of institutional knowledge too, especially
Yeah,
for, parents who are immigrating to a new country.
yeah,
All they can depend on is that structured path of getting to a stable job, like getting that career, based on what I'm sure what they've seen, amongst their friends or like on TV or something like that. For me, I can say that like it wasn't I I don't think I can say it was easy because it was definitely challenging. Like
yeah.
coming to America, I basically we made the decision to come to America like so quickly. It was when my dad's side of the family, so they're all in New York. My dad's side of the family relatives are in New York.
Mhm.
And when we received the news from like the immigrant agency saying like, hey, this is your last chance to, if you want to come to America. And at that time, the timing was right. And my dad was offered an engineering job in the US. So everything like kind of was right. But I personally didn't really care to move because, I was a kid, I had friends, I was going to school. Like we were having like a
Yeah,
just enjoying my life as a little kid, And
yeah.
then, coming to America, I remember we flew into JFK and my parents, so me, my brother, and my mom and my dad came, and my dad had us stay with my grandparents in New York for like a month, and then he went to San Jose to, start his job, get settled, find an apartment and everything. And then, we came to America with like four, like was it four or not? I think it was like 9 or 8, like big luggages. Those like immigrant, I don't know if you
Yeah,
know, like the
yeah.
big bags. And
Like
yeah, and
tape,
and
tape, like taped together with like duct tape, and that was what ours like. So they're
and
like,
we're like zippers. It was like dark black. You can, yeah. Anyway, so we came here. So and we were told when we were in Korea that California, NorCal is like the desert, so we don't have to bring anything. So we donated everything from like silverware to plates to thick jackets to I donated all my toys, everything, literally. We just brought clothes and that was pretty much it. Um,
wow,
so then after a month of my dad, settling in and finding an apartment for us, the rest of my family moved over there, me, my brother, and my mom. And yeah, it was pretty intense. I remember like, my dad had an engineering job, so that's great. But at the same time, like we still had to like, I remember driving down and like, going to like garage sales to just like pick up some like furniture last minute because we had to get settled. And my parents were trying to get ready for me and my brother to start school, all that stuff. So, growing up and going back to what you said, like my parents never told me to go be a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I put that pressure on myself of like, hey, like I still want to like, they worked so hard,
Yeah.
throughout me and my brothers, schooling and stuff. Like I want to be able to do that for them. And I think that pushed me to always focus on like, hey, gotta get through school, gotta get into a good college and get a stable job. So I think I put that pressure on myself and I just kind of went so like it was like just accelerating so fast to like, first it was like coming to America, learn English, get,
Right.
work hard so then you can get to the similar level as your peers in terms of your English and just like, your skills in a new country. And then I just kept on going. It was just like not stopping to the
Yeah.
point where, yeah, I got there, but then I just didn't know when to stop. And I think that's what a lot of, like AAPI, but specifically AAPIs who moved here from a different country have to go through. And I think that applies to people who aren't AAPI, who are from
Right.
different countries, assimilating in America. But yeah, it's just the experience is so interesting. And looking back, I'm like, if I didn't have music and all the performing arts, the musicals,
Right.
all of that, it would have been very, very interesting. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's you think about these moments in our lives, that appear to be these hurdles. Like I think about just all the challenges that we've all gone through, and specific to you and I, specific to you and me in this, what we've gone through. There's all these hurdles, in terms of like whether it's sort of the assimilation and finding your footing in a new country, or with me it was like I didn't I've always, and I always looked at it as a struggle until recently, and I always looked at like I didn't know if I had like one foot in the east and one foot in the west when it came to like everything, not just music but just in terms of my brain, in terms of like my soul. I didn't know where I fit in. It was always this thing where I was like, oh, like I was that kid that would go home and talk to my parents. And when I talked to them in English, I talked to them in an Indian accent. But then when I go to school, I would talk in an English accent, American accent.
Wow.
It was like
Yeah.
I would not just change the language, I would change like I would literally, and it was I did that probably until I was like 15. Like it was crazy. Like I mean, I spoke like this my whole life, but then when I was home, I'd talk in like an Indian accent with my parents. And so I think, and I'm rethinking about that now. It's the first time I've thought about this in a long time. And it's, you know, I always looked at, and I remember emotionally feeling that struggle. I'm like, where do I fit in? Am I Indian? Am I American? Am I both? What am I? You know, and I think I saw that as a hurdle, and then eventually came to a point where I started embracing that I had like the ability to draw from different places, and and then when I started injecting that into my music, and it's not saying that I was making fusion music. I wasn't. I had a rock band called Goldspot. It was this like indie pop rock band, and it was like there were definitely some like old Bollywood influences in the music, but it was like subtle. It wasn't like there weren't like tablas and sitars along with like music, like rock music I was playing. It
Yeah.
wasn't that fusiony. It had this subtle thing that only like somebody who was normally South Asian would be like, yo, man, that reminds me of this Kishore Kumar track from like 1970, whatever, So, and this is the thing that I started realizing, and this brings me to my next sort of question for you, is that we have this unique ability, and not just you and me, but but anyone that's like, whether you're AAPI or whether you're whatever you are, I mean, it doesn't matter what you are. You have this unique ability. We're all unique in our own ways, to draw from, um, whether it's our ancestry or draw from the city we grew up in, or the environment we grew up in, the whatever it is, we have the ability to draw from multiple places, and instead of looking at sometimes the challenges of our childhoods or the hurdles we went through, look at those as like, oh, this is a place where I can actually like pull influence from to inform my music and inform the artist I want to be. And when you look at things from that perspective, it's pretty empowering. So it's like there's a lot of pride that you can sort of take with it. And it's helped me massively in my career. Like you know, and so my question is like, we're here celebrating AAPI month. And AAPI is broad. It covers lots of different cultures. Indian, Chinese, Korean, whatever, Pakistani, whatever. And so, Japanese. And so when you think of all the AAPI cultures musically, like what do you find commonalities across these cultures? They're also different.
Yeah.
But do you find commonalities? And if so, what are they across the different?
Definitely. I mean, I think in general, like the commonality in it all, AAPI, or music created by AAPI
Mm-hmm.
or not. I feel that, I mean, music is universal, right?
Yeah.
But if we're looking at specifically Asian American Pacific Islander creators, I think so. I think there's, like we talked about before, like there's, we based on like speaking for my influence from like growing up in Korea and stuff like that,
Yeah.
a lot of our like it's very melodic, right? We tend to focus on a lot of melody, the top line, and then also like focusing on like there's some religious like influences too in terms of the melody and like the instrumentation of music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like if I'm gonna bring up like Korean dramas, the OSTs, the original soundtracks for every Korean drama I grew up listening to, like watching and stuff, it's got that hooky, like melodic,
Mm-hmm.
somber-ish type of like vibe.
Melancholic.
Melancholy. There you,
Yeah.
that's the word. It just hooks you right in. And, we have that, I think that kind of that DNA kind of flows throughout all of our like AAPI creators in a way
Mm-hmm.
that we
Yeah.
can pull from. Also, I want to say, I've been asked recently, like, hey, what is AAPI music?
Yeah.
And, of course, we're going to talk about all the different influences and different sounds that, in
Mm-hmm.
traditional instruments that we grew up with, or we grew up just subconsciously being aware of because of our culture and stuff. But I think AAPI music, really at the end of the day, it's music created by Asian American people, just like all other types of music, like it's America's a melting pot and we're all part of it. So I think at the end of the day, that's just my thought on it. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I think the interesting thing is, and this is something that you just brought, and I never thought of before, which is like brought up is like there's a melancholy. I've
Mm.
noticed this even hearing like non-Indian music too. There's like, and I don't know if it's like if we are sort of like these very emo-y cultures at our core, but there's a spirituality certainly with Indian music, that stems from a very like a highly sort of like highly religious sort of religious culture, in
Mm.
India, and spiritual culture, and in a lot of that, in a lot of sort of Hinduism and Buddhism, and a lot of these traditions. And it's not just exclusive to AAPI. It's like you hear it
Sure.
in I hear it in sort of like Hebrew songs that are sung. But there we have drones. Like we have this sort of like there's this idea of returning to like a center,
Mm.
and a tonic. Like the tonic in the music is just like the it's like the place that to which we return constantly. And in a lot of Indian music, I find um, so there's like you don't really hear a lot of harmony. Like you don't hear harmonic changes. A lot of times things just pedal on the one, and you can hear the drone and like the bass line. You can't even make it out sometimes. It feels like it's like don't, and we hang on that for an eternity. But
Throughout the
then
entire song.
all these melodies come out of it, and that's sort of how I was raised musically. Like there's some of my scores that I've done. Um, the score I wrote for This Is Us, that entire score is a very sort of like drone based score where I don't change chords once in 106 episodes of that show. So it was like I rarely, like maybe once I may have, but like it was all hanging on the tonic. And it's interesting, like I wrote that score not trying to be Indian, not trying to pull in, but it just was in me and it came out. And when I noticed it was, I embraced it for what it was.
Yeah.
And so I think like, you know, and the other commonality too is that in sort of like Carnatic Indian music, you hear it in a lot of the South Asian sort of you know, cultures and music, or Asian cultures. You hear quarter tones singing, like you hear like the notes between the black and the white keys being sung. And that's something, and that's not exclusive just to AAPI. And you hear that in a lot of Middle Eastern cultures. And so I think when I try to define what AAPI is, I can't. I mean, but you do begin to see commonalities. And I certainly agree with you too. Is like when I hear like old Hindi music growing up, like I couldn't even hear the backing tracks behind the singers, or I couldn't even hear what the music was doing. It was always like, if this is the mix, this was the vocal.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like
Like
all you
right
heard.
there.
Yeah, but it
Like,
also gave me that. It also taught me the value of melody, and it's sort of like the way that I. It's the way that I write. Like I write, I'm very thematic and melodic based. It's the only I write themes for scores, and I go back to them. And so again, it goes back to this idea of we can take these experiences we have, and as kids, was I embarrassed to be Indian? Probably at points. I was probably like, you know, because I think I was the only kid in my school that was Indian, and so like for a lot of my elementary, and so so there was, which is why I'd go home and speak an Indian accent, and then come home and speak in English. I was like embarrassed by both cultures in some way.
it was
But
kind of,
but once I learned to embrace
yeah,
what it
that's
means
cool.
to have, you know, and that's what I tell my kids. My children are now half Indian, and my wife is, you know, she's grew up in Vermont, and her ancestry is like English and Scottish and Irish. Um, So I've got halfies here. I got halfies, and sort of the way I'm raising them is to remind them that they're lucky. They have like so much they can pull from so many different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and it's just special. And so like, and I think also when you think about, you know, I look at This Is Us, was that TV show I did, right? It was a very Indian score when I look back on it. And I remember having a conversation with Dan Fogelman, who created the show, and I was like, there was one scene, all of a sudden I started playing tabla with my fingers, but on a wooden table. Like I was doing stuff like that with my fingers and recording it with my mic. And I was like, oh, that became the percussion. I was effectively playing tabla, but on a table, like with my fingers, or on my guitar, I would do it. And I asked him once, I was like, is it getting too weird? Are we getting too Indian? And he's like, no. He's like, keep doing what you're doing because it feels authentic to the story. The story for This Is Us was about it was a family drama, and we went through all generations of the same people, like different eras of the same people. You know, and so we would jump around in time a lot.
Mhm.
And the whole show was about how like the actions of sort of one generation, uh, seemingly small movements they can greatly inform the future, and one left turn here affects the course of events, and there was this idea that we're all deeply connected, based on our sort of actions, by our
Yeah.
actions. And in Indian culture, that's karma. You know, you're sort of like your karma is sort of like what you do has impact. And so you should be mindful of what you do whenever you do it. And so those types of things entered my brain when I was writing the music for the show, and I ended up pulling from a lot of my own childhood music. A lot of the melodies I wrote felt like they could be Hindi songs if I wanted them to be.
Yeah.
And so um,
I love
that's
that.
an example of taking something that you grew up with and then applying it in a very highly professional space at a high level, and just being like, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
do this.
And I think that that's such a great story. And This Is Us is a dope show, and your
Oh,
music is
thanks.
dope. Yeah, so like totally. I feel like it's like subconsciously in us. And I think that's what makes it so great for us to, be here, like as like fellow Americans, fellow Asian Americans, like being able to like have that, like, I guess, like culture or the idea, even if you're not an immigrant, even like if you were born here, like you have your parents or your grandparents, like kind of teaching you those things. And I think for artists or songwriters or composers who are in this music world, or who feel like they want to, get their voices heard, whether through writing or composing or singing, like,
Mhm.
even though there isn't a lot of like, a lot of us, I mean, we are growing.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have that pride and realize like, hey, like, we have so much to add to the industry, just like how Sid, like your amazing music, it's like
Oh,
it has a lot of South Asian, like your background and influences in there, but it's like it's mainstream. You know what I mean? Like when I write music, when I'm in the room and I'm not making like Korean traditional music, which I think it's dope too.
yeah.
But
It's
like
so,
I
yeah,
know,
dope what you
yeah,
do. It's amazing. Yeah.
I know that the influences and just like the energy and the vibe and that melancholic vibe mixed with my experience here, like I've lived in, the States longer than I lived in Korea. So
Right.
just all of that subconsciously, I feel like that's part of you. And when you're creating, it adds to that. So I guess what I want to also share with whoever's watching and us is that like we need to take pride in that and like speak out
Mhm.
more, so then we can add to the music world, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also like you have to almost, and your music is so beautiful and incredible, and it's because you're able to sort of like pull from everything in the right way, and you've worked on it. And that's the other thing too, is you've worked on it. You've
Mhm.
spent many years honing this thing. And that's
Right.
another piece of this, is like, if you listen to like and I don't know what your earlier stuff sounded like. I've heard your recent stuff, and it's beautiful and incredible. And it's just like, it's so special for anyone who has to like go listen to AZRA's music. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Like, um, the like for me, my early music I was writing was super Indian. And in a way that was like, I
Mhm.
listen back, look back, and I'm like, oh, it was like fusiony initially. I was like, no, no, no. I would be singing rock songs in the middle of it, and be like, I started doing stuff like that. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not good. And it was like, but you have to sort of like keep at it. That's the other thing too, is like, you know, when I always tell people, like, composers always ask me like, what's like the best advice you can give for like somebody who's trying to break in or trying to I'll just say, just don't stop writing, because like, you need to sort of find your voice. And also, like, your voice changes, just like your voice physically changes when you're a kid and you hit puberty. Your voice changes, and like, and so it can evolve, right? It can evolve into, but nothing evolves
Yeah.
unless you actually do it.
Yeah.
You just
That's
think
cool. I wish you
nothing
had
can
a
evolve.
I wish you had a recording of your early
Oh yeah,
that would have been
just
sick.
oh, I would be on stage, and like the first 2 minutes would be me just like doing like ripping, like, and I was like, and it was like, and people
Good.
were like, people like, there were like, like, definitely like, LA like yoga loving people being like, oh my God.
Oh, I would be right there. I'd be
But
like,
yeah, and so
I'll start
definitely had,
I'll
definitely like
start now.
attracted that a little bit.
That's
But like,
dope.
but the point is, like, you got to evolve,
Mhm.
and you can't evolve unless you're, and it doesn't even matter. You don't have to be working. You don't have to make any money.
Mhm.
You just have to write and
Yeah.
find that sound. Like having a job on a TV show or a film from in my world, or having songs that you're performing in places in your world, or licenses and shows and TV, like that's a piece of this. But like your evolution as an artist is not coming from that work. It's coming from you developing your own sound and your own
Right.
writing and what you do when when you are doing it for yourself. And I
Mhm.
think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And so,
Yeah.
and to that point too, it's like, I mean, there've been a lot of hardships and that we've all experienced. And for me, the as this is part of the challenge, right? And I remember when before I was a composer for TV and film, I was in a band, and we were playing gigs out in LA, and record companies would come to see my band perform, and we had a bunch of interest at one point, um, and we eventually were signed to Mercury as an artist. But before that happened, I remember there was um, a major label head that had come to see us perform, and had directly mentioned, I don't know, people are pretty brazen, I guess, when they mention this, mentioned that like they couldn't. This was about, when was this? This was like soon after 9/11, um, and so 2001, and they said, they're like, we love the band, we love the songs, but we don't think we can support a brown lead singer at this time, given the climate. And that was like, holy shit. I was like, that was like, and I remember like, I wasn't even pissed about it. I just remember feeling like, oh, like this. Like, I haven't felt this way since I was like a kid. Like of like,
Mm.
you know. And I remember thinking that like I have a choice here. I can either like let that get me down. I can complain about it and get the sort of like pity from friends and be like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. That sucks. Or I could just sort of use it as fuel, and I used it as fuel. And so it was like, okay, well, it's their loss, and we're going to keep on going. And eventually got signed to Mercury, and did what I did in my band. And so these are moments
I'm
that,
sure that that story is so inspiring, I'm sure, to other like Indian American kids or people around like the fact that you persevered and you
mhm, yeah,
didn't like let that get to you and you're like F off, like I'm gonna keep going.
right.
That's very
Oh, well, thank you. And that was a pretty important moment for me, because it's like these are moments that like they make you stronger, and you're just like, okay, and they give you that confidence. Like had that not happened, maybe, and had that not happened, um, maybe that label would have signed me, and then I wouldn't have had the same sort of struggle and pressure that sort of like propelled me to really hone in on what my sound was and figure that out.
mm.
And maybe I wouldn't have brought all these influences to This Is Us. Who knows? Like, so do you have moments of hardship that you faced in your journey? And can you talk about them if you don't mind sharing?
I mean, as an artist, I
Yeah.
mean, yes, I mean, all the time. I mean, I think the path that we're on, like as like artists, it's meant like we're constantly on a roller coaster, like ups and downs and ups and downs, and that's not just within the AAPI artist community; it's for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to focus on like the AAPI, I'd say like overall, there's definitely it's gotten better over the years. In the last couple of years, but there's definitely a lack of like mainstream music AAPI representation. So it's always like walking an unbeaten path.
Yeah.
Like you're always kind of trying to like you're walking that, but at the same time, for me, I embrace that. And I know that, so for me growing up in Korea, like my first exposure to like popular music
Mm-hmm.
is from my mom, and it was like Michael Jackson, Tina Turner, like
Nice.
Barbara Streisand, like Whitney Houston, and then like the Beatles. She friggin' loved the Beatles. And then when I came to America, that's when I was exposed to like K-pop music. And then so it was kind of like a hodgepodge, mixture of American music, Korean music, pop music. So for me, even when I started writing music, it was very like, I mean, my early stuff is very pop. It's like pop, but I've added a lot of my like the melodic, the melancholic, the super melodic music into the songs. So I guess that's where my Korean influence was added, but it was just
Oh,
very like pop that, and then my first tour was, tour with the Plain White Tees on like a high school tour. And then I went to do like a Pride Festival tour.
right.
So, yeah, so like because of that, like I feel that my path, it's definitely a little bit different. But I think again, it's being on AAPI, like because there isn't a lot of, us out there in the industry, though we are growing. I think there's always that ups and down. But yeah, I think again, like in terms of facing those struggles, I kind of look at it as like as an artist, like that's like our journey. And like you said, all those things like make us stronger and make us who we are. So I think that, if there are other like AAPI artists or songwriters who want to, get their voices heard or they want to start music, yeah, I mean, there's going to be hardships in life,
Yeah.
but the most important thing is just doing it and almost not even thinking about the hardships that are already there or that other people who came before you faced, but really just looking at it as like, hey, I'm an artist. Like
Right.
what message, what do I want to say? What truth do I want to tell? And I think that will kind of help like all of us kind of get through and then just like, become more authentic to ourselves. That makes sense.
And that shows in your music particularly. And I think that's the thing that you hit on something really important is for me, this sort of like litmus test for what I listen to or what I like to listen to or music that moves me, yours included, is stuff that resonates with me because it's authentic. Like if I believe it. And I think that's the case for people. They don't know, may not articulate it that way, but it's like your music needs to be believable. It needs to feel like you, whatever that is. And that's the thing of taking these hurdles that we've gone through, from you moving to this country at the age of 9 to me facing the discrimination I faced early on in my career, to all the challenges that you and I have with family and thinking about the guilt that we feel, all these things that we feel. We have to remember, like we are blessed with the ability to do this and the talent to do it. Not just you and me, but anybody who's probably listening right now. You have a talent. You're here invited to this thing because you do this in some way. And you just also, we're blessed in one big way, and that is that we live in this global economy. The world is sort of like dictated by a global economy. There's access to stuff around the world is a text away or sort of like a quick search away, and we are all connected. And so if you ever feel like you're here in this country and you don't feel heard or seen, this is a huge world, and you have access to people from around the world. I have access to a billion people in India that are listening, that could be listening to stuff I write.
Yeah.
Or, and so I think when you look at where you live, it's sometimes nice to look at the holistic sort of picture, and the idea that like we live in a very sort of highly accessible planet, and so our music has global reach, and so we should feel empowered to, if that helps you feel empowered to be yourself, go do it. And I'm also finding in the work that I do today is like people are looking for original voices. People are looking for like the authentic sort of version of these stories. I work with a lot of directors and producers, and it's all about authentic storytelling. And when you have stories about whatever, any disenfranchised communities, and you happen to be one of those people from those communities writing music, you can bring an interesting perspective, and you should see that value um, as as an important thing, and that's why we support and advocate for each other. And
Yeah.
speaking of advocacy, I want to talk to you about like the advocacy work that you do. I mean, SONA is a membership-based trade association. SONA is a not-for-profit, um, and it's sort of like it stands in that space for songwriters who are unable to legally unionize in the United States. Our focus is on advocacy, on education, and community, which is why we're all here together today. And so, what does that mean to you? And please tell us about, you do some wonderful advocacy work too, with youth, and if you can sort of talk a little bit about that, and also just what this, even just being in this conversation with you and me today, what does this mean to you? And not because of me, but because of us
Of
together.
course, because of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, okay, first of all, I just want to talk about Sona too. Like, I was introduced to Sona like way like 2016, 2017 by a really good friend of mine. And John, I'm sure you know Sid, and like, other folks. And it's, I feel like Sona really just anybody listening who's not part of Sona or who is like, it's a very supportive organization, and really a great way to like connect with songwriters as well, and like also advocate for
Definitely.
rights. And I don't know, like just being part of it, and also seeing how all the positive changes have been made, thanks to the community. It's been pretty cool. So yeah, so that's it. Anyway, so advocacy on the things that I focus on is, so I'm really, really passionate about youth empowerment, and just, like for our next generation, and just being there. I wrote a book called The Cupcake Theory. It's a self-help inspirational book for self-worth and just like being who you are. So what I do is, as part of my music advocacy, I go to different schools and nonprofit organizations, middle schools, high schools, and then do put on like a motivational concert. And I call it like Welcome to the Sixth Dimension. And I don't know if you know the Sixth Dimension yet, Sid. You're in it right now. So basically the sixth dimension is like it's a shift in perspective. It's a world I've kind of created as a kid because, growing up, there were like older adults telling me like, oh, you are kind of different. Like, are you from like a different village or a different sixth dimension? And
Ah,
that used to make me feel a little weird as a kid, like, oh, why am I not normal? But then, later on I grew up, I was like, hey, I'd rather exist in the sixth dimension, because that's where you can be yourself and let go of your inhibitions and just, go after what you want, and not, unapologetically. So when I do these, like when I put on these motivational concerts at schools and for students, I kind of I do like, we'll perform music and then do a lot of like Q&As, and talk to the youth. Last May during AAPI month, I really wanted to put on like a tour where I specifically go to different schools with heavy, AAPI students at the
mhm.
school. So I did that last year, and it was so fulfilling and heartfelt. And just seeing, and the some of the things that I learned and opened my eyes was that there's so many. I mean, it wasn't something new that I learned, but it definitely got to me even more and made me want to like do what I do more. Is that there's, specifically for AAPI, there's so many students and young talents who are so interested in going into music, and want to do songwriting, and then they're in a rock band, they're in a K-pop band, they're just doing all that creative stuff. And I think that there's a lot of there are quite a few of, AAPI artists out there right now, but I think we need to just be more vocal, and all of us need to like going back to that idea of mentorship, and
Yeah.
being able to be there to say, hey, yeah, like you can go after it. It's not that we don't have Asian American, artists, that a lot of them, it's not that they're all like looking for, inspiration from their motherland. It's like they're here, they
Yeah.
have stories to tell. It's just, I think, they just need more mentors and people to kind of reach out to. So I love what you said earlier about like networking and being able to like reach out, because that's how it helped me,
Yeah.
navigate through life here. Yeah.
And there's organizations too that you can be part of. You know, you know, so like part of like our job in sort of what we're doing today is also letting people know that there's ways to there's networking opportunities, ways to do co-writes with people, get advice, get any information you need to help you navigate through this, or maybe there's mentorships that can sort of arise, that can come out of some of these conversations. But Sona is a great organization, obviously, that's why we're here today. I also recommend the CDC, and that's not the Center for Disease Control, but that's the Composers Diversity Collective, and I'm a member of that. And so, sort of like minorities that are feeling like they need to sort of find a home in this sort of among composers in this world, I highly recommend you join. You join the Composers Diversity Collective. There's a lot of lovely people on it, a lot of smart people on it who are doing a lot of great work. So these organizations are here for we're here for each other through this, and I've certainly and then there's another organization that I'm on the board of, called AFI, which is Artistic Freedom Initiative, and you can look up AFI as well, and we sort of support disenfranchised artists around the world. So if there's like a I don't know, like a Persian artist that is thrown in jail for some poetry that they've written or songs they've written, and they've been thrown in jail by the sort of totalitarian governments that are in which they sort of they live under, or repressed, or like oppressive regimes that they're under, and they're thrown in prison or thrown in jail. If you look up AFI, you'll see some of the work that's been done there. And I can't take credit for any of the work. I'm just on the board, but like this is a very, very deep cause to me and my family. And but a lot of great work is being done for artists around the world there too. So we don't have much time left. So I have a few.
Oh, I was
Yes.
gonna also add,
Yeah.
also going to shows,
Oh yeah.
going supporting other writers or other artists. That's a really good way to meet people,
Mhm.
to kind of get yourself in the door too. So
Yeah. And always reach out on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and yes, I'm that old that I'm on Facebook. But yes, if you're a middle-aged South Asian and you want to reach out to me on Facebook, just do it. Okay, so Azra, thank you so much for joining us. As we close, I have a few rapid fire questions to ask. You ready? Like rapid fire round.
Okay.
One word answers. Or
One
two.
answer. Okay.
Or two.
I'm a Libra, so.
Or two words.
Okay.
What song do you wish you wrote?
The Greatest Love of All, or Bad Romance.
Greatest Love of All is 4 words, but I'll let that pass.
2 words.
I'm kidding. Yeah, great work. Greatest Love of All, 100%. I'm with you on that. Who is your favorite songwriter?
Martin Sandberg.
All right. Who is your dream co-write?
Max Martin. Same dude.
What are 3 of your writing in studio must-haves?
Ooh, okay. I have studio must-haves. Definitely a notebook and pen. So like a physical notebook and pen. Throat coat with Manuka honey.
Oh wow. Okay.
Something hot water or tea, and crystals. I have to have my
Nice.
crystal. Yes.
And this is a high pressure question, and you don't have to, but do you have a favorite quote? You don't have to have one either. I don't even have one. I don't even know why I asked the question.
Yeah, I have a lot of favorite quotes that I look up to. But one quote I can memorize is the one that I made that I want to share. So it's like a mantra, and it's follow your passion, create your own show. The world is your stage. For anything you can imagine is possible.
Whoa, you're gonna make me cry here.
I say that after every set. I do.
That's very beautiful. That's great. What is one of your current music-based goals?
Hmm. So I just got back from Nashville, made a ton of music, so definitely releasing the music and going on tour.
Well, we can't wait to check you out and keep on listening to your beautiful music. And I'm gonna actually like go down the rabbit hole and listen to like all of your stuff now.
Uh,
Well, that was awesome.
your music.
Thank you so much, Azra, for being our special guest and for joining us and taking the time. We appreciate you and everything you're doing for all the advocacy work you're doing, what you represent to the AAPI community. Clearly, you're so important that we had to talk to you today.
Uh,
And we appreciate everything you're doing and all the support. And I can't, the number of people that you're inspiring with what you do um, is like the thing that that you should feel so proud of too. I mean, you're probably inspiring so many people with your work. And anyway, what we just did will be available on the Sona YouTube channel, so check it out there. And I believe the link has been placed in the chat along with the Sona link, but you can check it out there. And if you're not already a member of Sona, please consider joining us. And you don't have to be a songwriter to be a member. If you just want to have a safe place to sort of like, talk and network with people and sort of figure out what your next steps are in the music industry, come join us. And you don't ever have to become a songwriter to be in Sona. So just please support the organization. And Azra, any final thoughts from you before we say see you later?
well,
Actually, you just said something very profound.
oh boy. Okay.
But you did. But if you have something else you want to add or anything you want to say before we leave, let us know.
Well, yeah, I just want to say thank you to Sona again for having me, for Sid for coming on and taking this time for us to have an amazing chat. I love your music as well, and I'll be just like jamming out to. And your music is making me motivated to watch the shows too, so that's good. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I don't know. I just think that the most important thing for all of us, whoever's watching and us, is that like never give up and continue to try. And if you have a dream or a little spark within you that you want to do something, you don't have to necessarily have this biggest dream and biggest goals to chase in your life. Like every step of that process of you getting to what you want is success. And that's actually you living your dreams. It took me a while to figure that out as well. So I just want to share that and know that like it's real. Like if you have a vision, if you have a dream, if you have this idea, like that's your truth. So speak it and stand for it.
Well, on that incredibly inspiring note, we want to thank you guys for joining Sona's In the Room with series. Thank you, Azra, for joining us. I'm Siddhartha Khosla, and have a great day.